there. Welcome to Biblical Chili. Why don't you follow me and I'll help you find a place to take that load off. The chili crew is just about to start. If you've been here before, well, welcome back. But if this is your first time, let me fill you in on how things work around here. You see, we speak openly about the Bible and our daily walk with Christ. And it's our continuing prayer that everyone that walks through those doors grows a little closer to Jesus every day. And just let me say, you came at a great time, too. We're taking a weekly walk through the Bible, one story at a time, from Genesis to Revelation. And after this is all over, if you like what you heard, on the way out, there's a button called subscribe. It's red and it's got a little bell next to it. Oh, and tell your friends. Oh, here we go. Here's a nice seat right up front for you. Now you sit down and get comfortable. And I'd like to sit here and talk to you and get to know you better, but that was the door. I got to go. Those youngsters better get the lead out. This crowd's ready to go. I'll be right over there. Didn't realize the restaurant would be this busy today. I'm coming. Welcome to Biblical Chili.
Order up.
All right, everyone, so we're going to continue the story in Genesis. Basically, to sum up everything that's happened, this is the culmination of them all moving to Goshen. It sounds like Jacob, or Israel, he's reaching the end of his days here. And does anybody remember how old he was?
Ooh,
105 or 110?
I thought it was like 110.
Old.
And Joseph said to Pharaoh, the days and years, this is Genesis 47, verse 9. The days and the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil are the days of my lives have been, the life of my Ben, and they have not attained the days and the lives of the years of my fathers. So yeah, he's well over 130 by now. So he's reaching the end of his life, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit, but basically chapter 49, Jacob reaches out to all of his children, blesses or prophesies over them, and we'll kind of get into that as we go along. So how about let's just jump in head first. Go ahead, Caleb.
All right. Jacob blesses his sons. When Jacob called for his sons and said, gather round so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength. Excelling in honor, excelling in power. Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel. For you went up under your father's bed, onto my couch, and defiled it.
Does anybody remember that story? We did. It was several episodes ago. It was when Joseph was in Egypt.
He slept with his concubine or something.
I mean, I'm sorry. He's something absolutely terrible. He slept with his father's concubine, and it wasn't. Many people think, it was just, he just, wanted to sleep with somebody. But no, that was actually back then, that was an assertion of power, is what that was. Because you slept with the head of that family's concubine meant that you were essentially asserting yourself as the head of the household kind of thing. Why would he say unstable as water? Mine says unstable as water, you shall not excel.
Not to actually have too much power or land or stuff like that due to just because of his desire over the flesh. So then he actually now has less power in the family status and also other things.
Well, and Reuben, he's the firstborn. So as part of the normal firstborn inheritance, he should be receiving the kind of headship and authority of really all of Israel. So his tribe should be that. But because of this, you never see throughout the entire Bible anyone from the tribe of Reuben ever having any sort of position of authority, whether in their kind of government system or battle or war or anything, and they're kind of small as far as tribes go.
Poor Reuben.
So he basically was like, well, because you slept with my concubine, now you don't get any more privilege.
Right. Well, what Justin said, it's because you kind of undermined my authority. You tried to steal my authority when I was still here. You're never going to get it.
At this point, I guess it would be like you're never going to get any, like no power.
Right.
Yeah.
Seems like there's a prophetic aspect to his words here. When you look at how history went on from that point, he was speaking from a place very authoritative and beyond the current situation and on to what life was going to look like, so to speak.
We kind of skipped over in the first verse where it says, I tell you what will befall you in the day. Like, I think his version said like in the days to come, but mine says in the latter days. So there's
mine says in the last days. So yeah,
in the last days. So there's actually 3 schools of thought on this. Like a lot of people think that means the time. I mean, because in the past, or about 1,000 years, like after this blessing, 10 of the 12 tribes, all but Judah and Benjamin, were completely vanished. So some people think, okay, well, these had to all have happened before, like when all the tribes still existed. Like, so it would have been sometime in those 10,000, or 1,000 years. But then there's also lots of prophecy about all of those tribes reemerging in the form of Ephraim, which we kind of talked about in the last episode. Then some people think these are literally the latter last days when all the tribes kind of are represented again. And there's the 2 houses back represented again, and the dry bones and the tree being reunited, all those prophecies. And then the third school is that it's a little bit of both, because prophecy is cyclical and it probably happens then before the tribes are dispersed and will happen again. Like it's kind of a constant thing.
Ooh, check this out. Okay, so 1 Chronicles 5:1. Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, he was indeed the firstborn, but because he this followed this guy's like all of the name of Reuben, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, so that the genealogy is not listed according to the birthright. Yet Judah prevailed over his brothers, and from him came a ruler, although the birthright was Joseph's, the son of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel. Wow. So this is all the way in Chronicles when it's talking about a lot of the genealogies and the families of these kids. So like the Reuben was like I think you just mentioned that, Susanna. Reuben was basically like nothing.
Right. Well, in this verse in Chronicles, like it kind of lays out, and we talked about it a little bit last week when Ephraim and Manasseh through, Joseph got the blessing, and they got, so like there's always 2 parts to a firstborn's blessing. There's the first part, which is you get double portion, double the inheritance. And then the second part is that you get that kind of headship, leadership, ruler, authority. And so the only time that in the entire Bible that firstborn blessing has been kind of split between 2 people is here, where Joseph, through his sons, gets the first part of the firstborn blessing, which is double inheritance. And then Judah gets the second part of the firstborn inheritance, which is the kind of leadership authority forever.
Right.
So, and that's very peculiar. And neither of them are actually the firstborn, so it's just kind of weird.
Simeon and Levi are brothers, and their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council, let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger, and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger so fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob, and disperse them in Israel.
Wow. Okay, so if you have not listened to the episode, I would highly recommend going back. There's an entire, we call it the Dinah incident. It was a bad incident, but nonetheless. But basically, one of their sisters was raped by a prince, and then they went in, and there was this whole story of convince them to be circumcised, the whole town of men to be circumcised. And then later on, Simeon and Levi went in there, and while the men were still recuperating, they went in there, just slaughtered everybody. All the men, I apologize, all the men were slaughtered, not the women and children. The women and children were actually taken into Israel. So like Israel actually basically adopted all the women and children from there. Is that the only reason why that this is brought up in this way, or do you think that these two boys, Simeon and Levi, were often like this? Like, does it sound like,
Weren't they always like that?
I was gonna say, didn't they have a part in with Joseph?
I think that was Reuben, and then it was.
Well, no, Reuben tried to save him, remember? Reuben came back and was like, oh, hey, don't do this. And he came back after they already sold him. They're like, hey, look, here's your share.
I like how the fact that it says Israel too, so they actually scatter them across the actual Israel instead of actually, because it says Jacob, then it says Israel. So he's talking about the actual nation before it was a nation.
Well, it's funny because it says divided in Jacob, which was Israel, and scatter them in Israel, which was Jacob. So it's, you know what I mean? So like, he's using both connotations.
I really like how he says, let me not join their assembly, and like, let me not enter their council. He's like, I don't even want anything to do with them.
Okay, so here in the footnotes of my Bible here, it says 34:25, it talks about them slaughtering the men of Shechem, their own descendants being scattered far and wide because of Dinah's brothers. All three were children of Leah, that they killed every male, so yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that they were in general like that, but that was just a very big representation of them being angry and cruel.
Right. I think it's interesting, though, like, because it says, in verse 7, I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So both of those things happened, but whereas, like, Simeon, he was dispersed and scattered, and I don't think his tribe got any inheritance of their own. Like, I think that their tribe was put maybe in, like, Judah's inheritance.
I thought Simeon was absorbed into Levi.
Not Levi, but Simeon was definitely, and it was the first one to be absorbed into just kind of everything. Like, and I think it even says some of the tribe of Simeon like totally left Israel altogether when like went and joined Esau's descendants. They were the first one to become like non-existent. But then for Levi, like they were dispersed in Jacob, and then they didn't have, or scattered in Israel. They also didn't get their own land of inheritance, but they had a city in every tribe. So they got a little bit of everything, and they kind of got the blessing. Like they got the priesthood, which is always kind of portrayed as being a big blessing. So it's like, Simeon lost their identity and, was kind of extinct, whereas Levi's separation became like a holy separation,
Yeah, because it actually says that here. That's perfectly worded, because it says in Joshua 19, it says the second lot came out of Simeon for the tribe of the children of Simeon according to their families, and their inheritance was within the inheritance of the children of Judah. So yeah, they were like you just said, they were just basically, you're going to be Judah's now.
Right.
Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, O Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk.
Okay, guys. Somebody give a jump in on this, because there's a lot. It talks about him being like a lion. It talks about a scepter. It talks about lawgiver, binding his donkey on the donkey's colt and the choicest vine. I don't know about you guys, but this sounds a whole lot like prophetic symbolism.
I think it's interesting that the lion cub reference, because they do call Jesus the Lion of the tribe of Judah.
Perfect. And what did Jesus ride in on during his triumphant entry into Jerusalem? What did he ride in on?
Donkey.
Yeah, it was a colt. And I find that interesting. And then they also talk about when it comes to the vine, Jesus gave the reference of we need to be grafted into the vine. And it just, some of these symbolisms are just so parallel to Jesus.
Right. Well, back up to the scepter will not depart from Judah. So Judah was someone from the tribe of Judah was always in authority. You know, we have the big King David all the way to then Jesus, who came from Judah, and you know, all power and authority was given to Jesus, and to him who shall be the obedience of the peoples.
So the hand shall actually be around thy enemy's neck. He was surrounded by, Jesus was actually surrounded by Romans. There was persecution through that and everything else. So he was actually walking with all the other people around him, and they're Romans. That is actually one of the biggest things that I see.
I think of it as like he's literally saying you're going to pave the way for Jesus to come into this world in a sense. But that answers the question of what he means by what will happen in the days to come, because he's, in a sense, literally prophesying Jesus.
There's a sense that it's a yes and sort of situation, whereas he's speaking to current situation, but there's a sense of prophetic speech to what he's saying, and you lose something when you try to approach it from drawing a hard line between the two, when you realize there's implications for the current as well as for the to come.
It's almost like a prophetic to come history, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't know what that's. Oh, it's called it's called a prophetic continuum. It's a prophecy that's almost repetitive in someone's life or in a people's life, and it just keeps, you know, obviously it leads to Jesus, but like you're saying with King David, and just there's more to it than just that hard line. Ooh, that's good. What's with the whole washing your garments in wine, his clothes in the blood of grapes, and these weird descriptions about eyes are darker than wine and the teeth whiter than milk? What do you guys think about that one?
Yeah, I have no idea.
I don't know where to go with that either. I have no idea.
The thing I could think of maybe was like his robes in the blood of grapes. Don't they talk about the grape press of wrath or something in like Revelation, where
there is a symbolism? Actually, there is a symbolism of it's actually it's a description of Jesus when he comes as a conqueror. The second time he comes as a conqueror, and one of the descriptions is he actually is wearing a cloak or a cape, more like a cloak, but his cloak is actually, it says it's dipped in blood. So that's a fuzzy kind of parallel, but it's the same thing. It's his garments are dripping with blood, but this says the blood of the grapes. Although I don't know, because Jesus did say, you know, when he did the communion, he said, "This is my blood." You know, that kind of symbolism with the grape juice. Okay, so go ahead and read verse 13.
All right. Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His borders will extend towards Sidon.
I didn't know, when I read this, I didn't know where to go with this. Like, I don't know the history of him. Of Zebulun. What did he do? Was he like just fisherman or something?
Well, yeah, so I guess it's kind of saying that like he's going to be like a merchant and a trader, which is kind of what his tribe was. So it's basically just saying like you guys are going to be, and that's just your tribe. Like these all end up becoming their like tribal identities, and he was the merchant, and his, you know, the ancestors kind of had a lot to do with like literally just shipping and that whole industry for a long time. So it seems really literal. I feel like there might be some more less literal meaning behind it, but
it says in the footnotes of this Bible, though landlocked by the tribes of Asher and Manasseh, the descendants of Zebulun were close enough to the Mediterranean, within 10 miles, to feast on the abundance of the seas.
That's what I was thinking. They were going to be fishermen, because that's normally the trade of the day, that and salt, especially during this time, because they still actually have the salt, the clear water salt. So it has so much abundance of salt.
Oh, no,
it
yeah,
makes
no,
you
they would
float.
have had the Dead Sea right in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
And they would have also had the Sea of Galilee.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's on the eastern side, but So yeah, it's probably just literal.
Yeah.
There's not much to say about Zebulun, but you're going to be one fisherman there.
I hope you like fish.
Right. I mean, I guess it seems kind of positive. It's not anything
Yeah,
bad.
it's not, yeah.
Short and sweet.
Yeah.
If you're not a vegetarian.
There's a contextual element to this that would have made sense to the people originally reading this that needs to be taken into consideration that I think speaks to the literal nature of what he's saying, because for those that knew and those that were of the time, I think there are elements of this that would make complete and total sense, but don't make sense if you don't understand the context
Right.
of which he was saying it and the culture and time frame in which he was talking about.
Also, I mean, can I also emphasize which I don't doubt that many of these are probably have some prophetic element to it. The funny thing about prophecy is the people of the time will not understand them, because that's the definition, like that's the point in prophecy. You're not supposed to understand it. The people that are in the middle of it are supposed to understand it, and it's supposed to be a warning to them for that time. So even if there are prophetic elements in this, I almost feel like this is just a forerunner. Some of it, maybe not all of it, but some of it is just a forerunner for like Joshua when he was splitting up the lands, all the way in the book of Joshua, possibly.
When you look forward to Jesus and the apostles, they thought that theirs was the last generation. They thought that they would be the last generation. Jesus would come back during their lifetime. And it's interesting to note that every single generation has some kind of evidence of thinking that theirs is the last by some group of people.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying about prophecy. It's hard because I'm sorry. Jesus said it, I think, perfectly, where he said, "No man knows the day nor the hour. Only my Father in heaven."
What about that one street guy on the corner that says today is the end?
Oh, the one with the sign over there?
Yeah. That guy.
That guy.
Issachar is a raw-boned donkey, lying down between two saddlebags. When he sees how good is his resting place, and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulders to the burden and submit to forced labor.
Ooh.
Do they become slaves?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, I wonder if they were just
1232. I'm going to look that up.
They were just content, but because it seems interesting. It seems like he's saying good things, like you're a strong donkey, which is actually kind of a compliment. And you saw that the resting place was good, the land was pleasant. He bowed his shoulder to bear burdens and became a slave. Huh. So
the King James version says that he saw that his rest was good and that the land was pleasant, and he bowed his shoulder to bear and became a servant unto tribute. I don't know if that means anything different.
I feel like this is hard to know what it means, because there's really isn't a whole lot in scripture about Issachar at all. It doesn't really say that much about them. So I don't know how to see how this played out.
Nope, I got nothing. I can't find anything on these guys. That short, sweet, to the point, I guess.
Dan will provide justice for his people, as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path, that bites the horse's heels so that its rider tumbles backwards.
18 actually says, "I've waited for your salvation, O Lord." I don't know if that's connected to it or not.
Yeah, that one's interesting because it all seems really positive too, maybe.
Well, no, it says he's a serpent by the roadside. I mean, that doesn't sound
right.
very positive.
Okay, because the first part says he'll judge his people
he'll be a judge. Yeah.
One of the only descendants we really hear of from Dan is Samson, the really strong guy, and he was one of the 12 judges mentioned. So it's literally, maybe they were judges. But then later, Revelation, when it mentions the 12 tribes of Israel, Dan is just left out.
That I know later on in scripture isn't the tribe of Dan one of the lost tribes because of something they did?
Right, but like so is Ephraim. So are all of them that are scattered. But like God always kind of it's very confusing because even though all of these tribes that were scattered and were punished, and to the point where God at first is like, you're gonna totally die out and never cease to exist. Like I think it's maybe Hosea where he's like going through this with Ephraim, but then he's like, actually, I could never do this to you. Like, I promise you all that you are all going to have an inheritance, and I love you, and I've watched you grow up. I held you by the hand as I've walked you through all these things. Like, I can't just forget you forever. So this is just for a time. But then, like at the very end in Revelation, like Dan is just not there. So it seems kind of weird. Because even though he may have been bad, like it seems like he should still be back by then.
It does talk about, in terms of biting the horse's heels, it says that Samson did single-handedly hold the Philistines at bay. I don't know really what that means, but...
Yeah, because Samson, well, it wasn't just a battle. It was many, many, many times.
Oh, yeah.
Samson, he took on the Philistines literally single-handedly every single time. And he prevailed every time except for one. But that was when he was deceived and yada, yada, yada. Whole nother story for another time, kids. His story is not all that wonderful.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. For the final installment of Blessings and Curses, you'll have to wait for next week. Now, as always, remember, you can find us on something called YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and a whole bunch of them other social media outlets. Just look up Biblical Chili. I promise you'll be able to find us. Oh, also don't forget to check out Joe's channel, BuddyWalkWithJesus.com. Goodbye, everyone. Do you think they're still listening? I doubt it. There can't be that many people that listened all the way to the end of the track. Most will probably skip it. But in case you did, congratulations. You're one of the few. We love you.